All right, look, I've been away for a minute, and if I tried to set everything up, I'd probably still ruin it. So I'm just gonna get to work. And very glad and very grateful to get some time from today's guest, Kevin Iole, veteran boxing writer, super achievements in the game, and was what I was trying to do when I set out on this thing 7 years ago or whatever. But anyway, welcome to the show, Mr. Iole.
I'm Kevin, not Mr. But I appreciate you. Thank you very much.
Gotcha. So I know we got a little bit of time, and it's a Friday night, so let's just jump into it. I have to throw this out there first. I really appreciate you and your appearances on Mannix's show. You guys and your contributions to that actually gives me a lot of information that I'm not able to get, not being as connected as you are. So I regularly I hear from you, and then I'm more comfortable with how I formulate my analysis of what's going on. So I appreciate you for that.
Absolutely.
So with that said, what's kind of your being in the game as long as you have, playing the role that you've played and covering it, how would you sum up like 2023 for boxing?
Well, I wrote for most of the year while I was at Yahoo that 2023 was shaping up to be a really good year in some regards. We were getting all the fights that we wanted to see made. Most of them were being made, right? I mean, that's a good thing. So if we're going to fix boxing, and, that's always a touchy subject among boxing fans, but if we're going to fix boxing, the number one thing that has to happen is the fights that should be made have to get made. And I saw a thing yesterday, and this is, I think, is people are trying to be helpful, but like there was talk of Devin Haney and Ryan Garcia. There was a discussion going on about the two of them fighting. And some fan on Twitter, who I will guarantee you knows zero about the business and what actually is happening, said, oh, Devin should get 70-30. And so, that is just pulling a number out of a butt, right? And that gives nothing. So I think people should understand, stay out of that. Like what the fans could do to help, if they wanted to help the business, is really put pressure on the promoters to make the fights that they want and go on social media. We want to see, A versus B, whoever it happens to be, want to see Gervonta Davis fight, whoever it is that you want to see him fight, put that out there. That is legitimate. That will help, because at the end of the day, they want to put the fights on that people want to buy and want to buy tickets to, want to buy pay-per-views to, and will watch, so that it helps their advertisers, and it all flows from there. So I think 2023 was a good first step in that regard, and the fact that we had a lot of the fights. Think of all those fights that we wanted to get made that got done. And it started, last year, but I think it really picked up this year. And we had the, Crawford Spence fight, which was, phenomenal. I was so happy to, see that. The Garcia Davis, fight that happened. What Haney did with Prograis was another example of it. So there was a lot of that was really good. I think from a business standpoint, boxing is not in a great place, right? Like pay-per-views are really, 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 really bad. Really bad. And even ones that have gotten, some people have put out a certain number, definitely not true, at the number that they got. And so I think the business needs to change, but I think what has to happen first is that they have to turn around and they have to say, we are going to give you the fights you want to see, and not just the main events. They have to put the fight cards together so that you go out there and the stand, like I was sitting in the stands in Las Vegas at so many of these pay-per-views, and 20 minutes before the pay-per-view is going to start, there's literally nobody in the arena, right? I mean, there's a 20,000 seat arena and there's maybe 1,200 people in the building, right? Okay. And you got to change that. So you look at the UFC preliminaries, and they, not every city is as big, but they have the building half full when the fights start. Some of them completely full. And we got to get to that in boxing by making good undercard fights, competitive undercard fights. What has happened in boxing is that there's these boxing people, they want to get their guys wins, and they put them on a card and they can say, hey, I fought on the De La Hoya card, or I fought on the Mayweather card, or my guy fought on the Mayweather card.
Right.
And he's fighting a nobody. He's not getting anything. He's not being challenged as a boxer to grow. You know, yeah, you want your guy to win, especially if you think he's an Olympian, a good prospect. You want him to grow, and so, but you want him to learn by facing different types of, you know, when Bruce Trampler built Floyd Mayweather coming up and the matches he made, Bruce showed him all sorts of different styles. You know, he knew that one day he'd probably fight Diego Corrales, so they had him fight a kid named Tony Pep, a tall, angular guy that had that reach that, you know, when Floyd got in there with Diego, he had seen that before because he had seen Tony Pep and that type of thing. The same thing they did with Oscar, and De La Hoya was on the way up. And so I think that, you know, let's start by making those early undercard fights, you know, have a point to them that help develop fighters. And then secondarily to that, the pay-per-view undercards, let's put good matches up and down that lineup and have somebody who maybe hadn't watched boxing in a long time say, damn, this is a really good fight card. What have I been missing? Those of us who are in the sport, and those of us, or those of you who are like hardcore fans and you don't miss anything, we are a very, 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 very minute number compared to the broader marketplace, right?
Yeah,
and makes no dent whatsoever. The hardcore fans and the media makes zero dent whatsoever on the bottom line. But if you can use your influence to get the big fights made, and then the big fights bring in more fans, and more fans bring in better undercards, you know, it just kind of all works from there.
I never understood how fans who stream the fights and don't pay for any of these pay-per-views, how they want to be so vocal with what the split should be. Like, that blows me away. What do you think? What's one positive trend that you did see coming out of what we did get in 2023? What's the major positive trend?
Well, I think there's a lot of talent in boxing, right? I mean, I think, you know, boxing goes in cycles, and the heavyweight division, I thought 2 years ago was going to be really good, and maybe it's not as good as I thought it was going to be, right?
I'm with you there.
Daniel Dubois is a pretty good heavyweight, but not what I thought he might be. You know, Jared Anderson, still to be determined, right? But I was disappointed at his one fight in the summer.
Martin against Martin.
Right, the Martin fight, yeah. And I think that, but I think when you look at boxing overall, there's a lot of really talented kids in the sport now, right? And on the way up, and, you know, in divisions under heavyweight. And so as a result of that, I think, you know, we have something to look forward to in the future, right? And, you know, you just look from a couple of years ago when you had Teofimo Lopez and Haney and, you know, Ryan Garcia and Tank and all these guys coming into the sport, and they said something, hey, we want to fight each other. And we don't want to avoid, and and then Shakur Stevenson came in, and he's saying that when you get those guys having that attitude, talented guys that say, I want to prove, I know I'm the best, I want to prove it against everybody. That's when you get back to the time like we had in the 80s when, you know, the Four Kings were there, and there were so many great fights, and boxing was a big deal, not just among a small, you know, group of really passionate fans, but in society in general.
Gotcha. With that said, I want to jump to the PBC discussion, moving over to Prime Video. I did not want to see PBC struggle to find a home. And I didn't want to see them fold or fail or anything like that. But just going over to Prime Video, I personally don't see that as making business easier moving forward. So where are you with that move? And do you think Prime Video is capable of being a good partner or a good steward for the sport?
Well, I think, are they capable? I think they could be the absolute best partner there is, right? You know, the NFL did a deal with them for a reason, right? You know, now it's going to be how much they invest and they put in the sport and how much they care about boxing, right? If I'm going to look at the PBC, if I have one criticism of the PBC, it's that they're too pay-per-view oriented and everything goes to pay-per-view.
Definitely.
And that's not how you build fans. I had a quote in a story a week or so ago talking to Mark Bacardi of In Demand, which is the company that puts out the pay-per-views and everything, and works with the cable and satellite companies and the streamers and everything with, you know, with that. And he basically said pay-per-view is not how you build a fighter, it's how you monetize him after you have built him, right?
Gotcha.
And Floyd Mayweather fought all those fights on HBO and ESPN back in the day. I was at his pro debut. I sat there ringside, and it was an ESPN fight. And, Floyd was there for everybody to see. And he fought, one of his big fights in early his career was Diego Corrales, HBO, Jose Luis Castillo, HBO. And then Floyd hit a certain level where now he's a star. He's at the top of his game athletically, and he's now ready to explode from a business standpoint. And they put him on pay-per-view, and it was a genius move. So I think the PBC has to rethink the way they do things, because it's not going to change. People are dropping Netflix, they're dropping all these streaming services, and they're not looking. So you brought it up before. Theft is a massive problem, and and we're never going to stop it. You can only try to cut it back. But for people are saying they want to see the fighters make more money. When you stream a fight, you are literally stealing money from the fighter's pocket. You're stealing it from Steven Espinoza or maybe Al Heyman or some executive at ESPN. Yes, those could all be people that you are. But the person getting screwed the most is the boxer taking the punches. And, that is something, it's not really worth a discussion, I don't think, because it's not going to change. But that's the reality of it. So if you profess to love fighters and want to see fighters paid more, then, quit stealing their pay-per-views. But I think in general, I think the PBC would be better off if they limited the amount of pay-per-views. And hey, when you have a truly big pay-per-view, go for it, put it on. But like, David Benavidez against Demetrius Andrade, that should have been a Showtime fight, right? No way is that a pay-per-view fight.
Right.
And of course it did no business. And some of those other fights that they have, I think if you do that, then, that's another way of building the business back up, right? Let's put fights out. Let's get people to see these great young fighters that we have and get, become fans of them. David Benavidez deserves to have a lot of fans. He is a good fighter. He's entertaining. Right. Even if you don't like him personally, you watch him, you say, man, this dude kicks ass, and he gets in there and fights. That's what you want to see, right?
Okay, so great place to go. And this Marie Donahue actually has some background with ESPN, and she's the mastermind behind the NFL, and they've done the investments over there.
Sure.
Fairly successful. Do you think she has a handle on? Okay, yeah, you throw us when you come in, when they came in and had the meeting. We have Gervonta Davis, we have Canelo Alvarez, and now either Terrence Crawford or the rematch, with however we want to look at that. How do the right opponents for those three, of at least for Tank and Canelo, how can those be successful over here with Amazon? I mean, I know the money could be there.
We first, to talk about that, we have to split the two of them, right? Because Canelo is further along in his career than Tank is, right? So especially as a pay-per-view attraction, Tank is just on the beginning stages, and he's kind of taken off and going into the pay-per-view, where Canelo has been a pay-per-view stalwart for 8 years. He fought Mayweather in 2013 that did 2 million buys. So I think a lot of that was Floyd, but you can still, Canelo did some of it, right? And so Canelo's been on the scene a long time, so we have to split them. So I think with Tank, put him on regular TV once a year, free. Like Oscar De La Hoya used to do that, right? He look up his record while I'm talking. He fought a guy named Daryl Coley in Madison Square Garden, and it was on HBO. It was after one of his big fights, right? So it was just like he was on pay-per-view. Then he went off pay-per-view onto HBO to fight a little bit of a lesser opponent, and people got a chance to see De La Hoya fight. They got to see some highlights of the previous pay-per-view fight. Here, De La Hoya, then you bring him back onto pay-per-view. And so I think, if you're looking at Tank, if he fights Teofimo Lopez, pay-per-view. If he fights, Devin Haney, pay-per-view. If he fights Ryan Garcia again for some reason, pay-per-view. Shakur Stevenson, pay-per-view. But outside of that little group right now, maybe Sabriel Matias, although I think that would be a better, fight for just put it on, out there free for fans. Give some people something for their money, because you will get it back tenfold down the road if you do.
Do you think that's something that the fighters are receptive to? Because so many of these guys seem to be quite unrealistic. And is there, can the business manager get through to them, or the Steven Espinosa type figures? Can they have that conversation with these guys and drive that point home and get some buy-in to do that? Or I think you guys may have even hit on it in the last Mannix podcast, where taking a look at this price point for some pay-per-views, it may be meeting people, fans in the middle there, where everyone is not $74.99 or something.
Or $85.99. Yeah. No, I mean, I think the number one thing that if I had a wish for boxing, and that we could make it healthier in 2025, continue in 2024 the trend that we saw in 2023 of the big fights getting made. It looks like we're starting that. We have Usyk fighting Fury coming up. We'll see who AJ fights. That'll be, if Wilder would have done his share, we would have had AJ and Wilder in March. So that was looking like a good stepping off point, right? So continue that trend, and then work on pay-per-view. Cut the price, moderate the price, and moderate the amount that you put on. And if you do it less becomes more. And that's how I totally believe it. I feel like if you put it less, now we're going to have a much bigger audience. You're going to build fans, right? And if you see, think about it, Tank's one of the most powerful guys out there. So he's a great example of this. If you put him in there with a little bit of a lesser contender, and it's a Amazon fight, it's free stream that's going to be on Prime Video, as opposed to having to pay extra for it, and he knocks somebody's block off, that's going to be all over social media, that clip, and people are going to be talking about Tank, and I can't wait to see Tank's next fight. You've started building the next fight before you even have the opponent, right? And then you get a good opponent, and hey, he's going to fight Devin Haney. Oh, and everybody's all jazzed up. Can Haney withstand the power? And you'll have all that talk going on. I think use pay-per-view judiciously, use it smartly, and look at the fighters who have done well, who have been the big fighters of the pay-per-view era. Pay-per-view is considered by the industry experts, not me, to have started in 1991 when George Foreman fought Evander Holyfield in Atlantic City. That was April of 91, I believe. That's considered the first pay-per-view fight. Okay. The big stars from that point were, what are we now, 32 years, 33 years from that almost. The big stars of the pay-per-view era have been Mike Tyson. Mike Tyson is the biggest. Like, Mayweather sold more because he was in an era when there was more to be sold. But right. Mike Tyson, in the paper, would have sold. He sold 1.6 million against Roy Jones in an exhibition fight, basically, right? But Mike Tyson, Floyd Mayweather, Manny Pacquiao, Oscar De La Hoya, Canelo Alvarez, maybe a couple smaller ones, like, you could bring up Gennady Golovkin, who wasn't a good pay-per-view draw on his own. Lennox Lewis, Evander Holyfield, they did good numbers, but usually with another, strong A side they needed to have. But that was it. Those are the guys that were the big drivers of pay-per-view. Like, there's not a ton of those guys out there. So, get it back to that, because, there's always going to be more addressable homes, right? So when Floyd blew past Tyson, what Tyson was doing was because there was more addressable homes. Well, if you build Tank, or you build Devin, or you build, whoever the fighter we're talking about correctly, there's going to be more adjustable homes in 2 years than there were, 10 years ago. They should theoretically be able to explode those numbers up. So that's my goal for boxing, and coming up is continue the trend of 23, be judicious with pay-per-views, and hopefully that has boxing really on a high going into 25.
Now, one thing with PBC going over there, they mentioned in the press release or whatever that they still have about 150 fighters. Do they really have the the roster that they had in 2015 when they had 4 to 8 guys from 140, 147, 154, super middleweight, and even a light heavyweight was a decent crowd of guys. Do they have that type of inventory right now to support going over to Amazon and being able to operate how they were 2016 to 2019?
Well, again, I think they have a lot of good fighters under contract, right? I mean, they are one of the big promoters in boxing. One of the issues that they've had over the years is their fighters not fighting enough, right? Like the Charlo brothers, both were in fairly high-profile fights recently, but what was the conversation around both of them when they were fighting? Well, they never fight, right? And they're out, and all that. And I think that was a problem that PBC had. Now, hey, if you're just looking at it strictly to make as much money on this one night, then okay, let's do it that way. But if you're trying to build yourself, especially if you look at your career, you say, hey, I'm going to be a fighter for 12 years, and I'm going to be a top level fighter for maybe 7 of those 12 years, right? You want to build yourself so that you can make those massive, Mayweather. I'll never forget him pulling that check out of his jacket and walking over to me and opening the envelope and showing me he had a $100 million check written to him for $100 million, right? That was pretty cool to see. And so we want to get to that point with these fighters now, right? Where they can make that kind of money, but they have to do it the right way, so you have to allow yourself to be promoted, to be built, and take ownership of your career, but don't use your own, if you don't have the knowledge, which most of them don't have, don't try to push your own knowledge over Al Heyman's or even more so, your manager, whoever, I mean, in a lot of cases, Heyman is their manager, but, just make sure that you give yourself the best chance to be successful for as long as you can be.
Any disappointment in not hearing from Heyman a statement of, I know he doesn't do it, but with this type of move, one thing, whether people like Eddie Hearn or not, I enjoy the fact that I get to hear it straight from where the buck stops.
Right.
And with this type of move and everything that kind of needs to happen for this to be successful, any disappointment in him not being the one that says something about what the vision is moving forward?
I believe it or not, I'll tell a funny story. I've always had a relationship with Al, right? I know I'm not going to sit here and tell you that Al and I talk or text or email or whatever, but I've had times over the years, like there was a fight in Seattle or in Tacoma, Washington. Vernon Forrest was fighting, I believe, on that particular show. And on the whole undercard, I sat with Al. It was at the Emerald Queen Casino. And I sat and talked to Al for a long time on that show. Other times, Al has been at shows at the MGM, or I was at when Mayweather was going to fight Berto, a Mayweather-Berto press conference. And we were sitting, the press conference was over, and there was me and 3 or 4 other writers, and we're sitting at a table, and it was up toward the front of the room. And the door, it was a big room, so the door was quite a ways back. And Al goes walking by, and he sees me sitting there. And he started to pass. He stops and he waves, and he walks into the room to come say hello to me, right? So I said, hey, Al. And I get up to, go over and shake hands with him. And as I did, another reporter sees him who had never met him, right? And comes over and says, Mr. Heyman, and I know the reporter's identity. I'm not going to say it, but Mr. Heyman, I'm so-and-so. And Al looked at him and realized, I'm in a bad spot. I don't want to be talking to reporters. And he got out and he left. Right. Now. So I like Al, and I think, he's not this mystery that a lot of people want to make him out to be. And I guess, he gets a lot of power out of being that, that riddle. Nobody can know what he's really like, but he is a real guy, and he's a living, breathing soul. He's not the Wizard of Oz, there's just behind the curtain over there. He's a smart guy. But I think, he's found, what he's doing is almost operating, as a manager more than a promoter, and he's helping these fighters maximize their earnings, but he's not helping the business of boxing. What we have to do is we first help the business of boxing, have the sport grow, have the sport develop. And as they say, a rising tide lifts all boats, right? So if we build the sport and have that successful, then the individual fighters themselves will inevitably follow. But when you try to start it with the individual fighters, the sport's always going to be in bad shape.
Yeah, I feel like that's what we have, a missing centralized voice for American boxing. And it's it's relying on these guys who are just figuring it out to try to promote themselves or lay out what's going to happen. And they're just really not capable of doing that.
Right.
So I hate that outside of, Aram still speaking for the top ranked guys, this large group of guys over here with the PBC it just looks like no one's running, no one's at the rudder or the at the helm. So I thought it was a moment where it would have been nice to hear a little something. Quick thoughts on Saudi. They're going back there in February, mid-February for Fury and Usyk. Is Saudi going to become the business model? At the end of the year, everybody's trying to be a part of this major event over there that really isn't letting all of us participate in it, or enjoy it.
Well, the Saudis are doing what they have to do for themselves. The Saudis are not looking to help boxing. They're not looking to build boxing. They have goals that they want to do. What I understand what they're, and there's, I don't want to simplify it to just two things, but I think, they want to attract wealthy British people, because it's like 5 hours away.
Okay.
To come vacation there, play golf, watch a soccer game, watch a fight. And then they want to get those same people to agree to retire there. That's kind of what two of their big goals are. And they're using all these different sports and different things to help build toward that. Right. So it's great for the people involved. You're getting these massive checks. Fury got it, $70 million, I think, for the Ngannou fight, right? But look what that did. That did horrible. It did zero numbers in the U.S.
Right.
People rejected it flat out of hand. And so are you going to give your business to somebody who doesn't have your best interests at heart? So I think, what boxing needs to do is, be selective, put a fight over there, when it makes sense. But if you just turn your business over, like how is boxing going to grow in the US if all the fights are in Saudi Arabia and they're starting at I know last week I was sitting there, it was 8 o'clock in the morning Pacific Coast time. I'm in Las Vegas, so I'm in Pacific time zone. The first fight came on at 8 or 8:30, wasn't, as I remember. And then the main event's on at 1 o'clock in the afternoon.
Right.
People are out on Saturdays in the afternoons. Back in the old days, they weren't as much, right? They knew boxing would be on at that time, but the habits have changed, and that's never coming back. They're out doing what they do. And so you're losing your fans. And how are you going to build new fans? If I take my kids out to see a fight, it'll help maybe make them fans for the next generation. But if the fight's in Saudi Arabia, I'm not going to be able to do it, right? And so, that I think that's something that we have to be cautious of. Yes, they're going to pay you a lot of money, but their interest is in Saudi Arabia and what boxing will do for Saudi Arabia. Their interest is not making boxing a better, more successful sport.
Yeah.
And that has to be remembered.
Gotcha. Because I got the feeling like this is just a bunch of globally popular sports people, and then, like you said, a bunch of wealthy people, and then some VIPs of there that they brought in, right. And they get to see the best fights. But this is totally removed from us fans, other than tuning in for the pay-per-view. So that's kind of a little concerning. You mentioned, I don't want to take up much of your time, but you have your new venture coming out now, leaving parting ways with Yahoo, coming out here with what's the website exactly?
It's going to be keviniole.com. So
It's a
I
subscription.
already have that URL, right? So I had a park. What I did about 15 years ago, I created a WordPress page, and I put keviniole.com on there just to write about stuff that I found interesting that was not work related, right? And I would go through over those, however many years it was, 12 or 15 years. Sometimes I would write a lot of stuff, and then I would go a long time without writing. Well, when I left Yahoo on December 1st, I decided to start my own site, and it's going to be a really nice website as well as an app that goes with it. And as I was in that process, I decided I want people to know that when I left Yahoo that I'm still working. So I decided to use the current version of keviniole.com as kind of a placeholder while my site is being built and everything is going up. So I'll break a little news too. I had said it was going to be a subscription, but I decided I'm not going to do subscription. Kind of like hey, I was talking about the promoters maybe not doing everything on pay-per-view. I decided to do the same thing, right? And why? So I'm going to try to be supported by advertisers. I'm going to put a Patreon or a tip jar or something. Hey, if you support my work and you like it, give me a tip and put it in here. That'll help me, because I'm starting. This is all coming out of my own pocket. I'm getting everybody and his brother wants to work for me and wants to podcast and write and do these things. But I got no money to pay for it, right? It's coming from right here.
Right.
And so I need to get it, I need to get the site built up. But I want to make a really, really good comprehensive site. And I want to have a feeling of community and engagement on this site. So I'm going to cover boxing. I'm going to cover MMA. And if you're a boxing fan and don't like MMA, there'll be a way on that site where you don't see the MMA content, or vice versa, you won't see it. I'm going to do a little bit about the bare knuckle boxing and a little bit about the slap fighting, but not a lot on either one of those. Slap fighting will probably be almost anything I do will almost always be just quick videos, right? I don't think I'm going to I might write something once in a while, but very rarely on that. But I'm going to have interviews from my YouTube channel, which is going to be worked on, and I'll have those interviews on there. I'm going to have engagement. So I'm going to try at least twice a week to answer questions from fans. There's going to be forums on there where you can, there'll be boxing, MMA, bare knuckle, and slap, and then you can create subcategories in them and have discussions on the forum. I just want everything to be civil, right? I don't want to get out there where, we get into anything, it's just, if we're talking about boxing, talk boxing. If we're talking MMA, talk MMA. I don't care what your opinion is. There's no sacred cows. If one person thinks Bob Arum's the greatest promoter of all time, and somebody else thinks Eddie Hearn is, and a third person thinks Al Heyman is, they all have the right to their opinion. Express it respectfully. Try to do it intelligently, give examples why you support that. But I want to have a place for boxing fans and MMA fans to go where they can have those discussions and talk to each other. I'm going to have comments on every one of my stories. So, if it starts to get personal and, then I'll have to turn it off, right? Because personal is not good. And that's different, and I get, oh, you're a bleep because you took comments off your Instagram page. Because people were writing personal insults, F you, and my family was on there, and my personal friends were on there. They don't need to be subjected to that, and they don't have to have that, and it doesn't help anything, right? Some anonymous person who knows where they are in the world, cursing at me doesn't really solve anything. If you want to tell me, hey, your story was terrible and here's why, I'm all ears. I'll listen, right? You mentioned yourself. I responded to you. Did I ever meet you before today, right?
No.
I never seen you before, right? And I don't even remember it, but you told me several years ago that you had reached out to me, and I respond. So I like to think I'm a people person, and I'm not holier than thou, and I don't feel like I'm bigger. I have experience in the fight game. I've covered boxing for 40 years, MMA for over 20 years. So I know some things because of my experience. But I also understand that, hey, that people are smart, and there's people out there that know a lot. And somebody may know more about me on a certain topic, or they may know more about me on all topics. I never try to set myself up as an oracle and the expert on everything. But so when I have this, I just want it to be a sense of community where people of the interest of combat sports will gather, and they can read my interviews. They can chat amongst each other, read my stories. I think I'm going to have some audio components. I'm going to have 2 podcasts, a boxing and an MMA podcast. And hopefully it'll be a site that I think people will enjoy and they won't have to pay for.
So now you just said everything was my vision. Like I want to focus on storytelling. I want to educate, newcomers on boxing and have this healthy discussion. Now, how are you going to, or what's your relationship to the rise of all of the fan-based or fan-led podcasts and I guess it's media that's been thriving the last
Right.
6 or 7 years with all of the negativity?
Well, I would say this, so let's separate the negativity for a second. I think on the one hand, it's great, right? Everybody has a voice, everybody has a chance to express their opinion and to contribute to the good of whatever it is that we're trying to do. Hey, I think all of us that get in, whether you're a professional journalist or you're just a person who loves boxing and likes to talk or write, and you create a site in order to do that, we all share that love of the sport. So we want it to be healthier, we want it to be better, and so that's good. But I think you have a lot of people who get in there and they want to do takedowns, and like I don't have any I've criticized a lot of people in my career, right? And you have to do that.
Right.
And people, somebody does something really wrong. Like I used to criticize the shit out of the UFC for no drug testing. And there's a million videos you can find on the internet of me sitting right next to Dana White. And he's like saying our drug testing is the government. And I would say bullshit. It's these guys are cheating their asses off and it's easy to beat the system. And then eventually they changed, right? So I criticized them really heavily. Now I haven't criticized them as much. Why is that? Because they did what they should have done, right? And they put drug testing in, So we need to criticize you, not just me, but you and the other fans out there. Hey, let's get out there and tell boxers, hey, we don't want somebody going in the ring and having, performance enhancing drugs in their system. It makes them more lethal and it makes them more dangerous. And the sport is already, I have sat there through 7 fighter deaths. And I've been ringside and watched those, and there have been many more that I've seen on TV.
Uh-huh.
And I had one guy follow me when he got knocked down. He got knocked through the ropes. I've told that story many times. It is not a good sight. And all these tough guys, let a guy fall on you and then have that fighter die a few hours later and see how you feel, right? And so fighter safety has to be prominent and anything in that. I always fight for fighter safety causes, and eliminating PEDs is one of them. So get back to your question, that I like the fact that there's people out there, if they do the right thing. Some of them abuse their platforms and they just use it for personal gain and to try to mock other people. And then that's a useless site. And I don't really care about that. And when it gets to be too much, it needs, I think, everything in moderation, but I don't have any problem. And I have helped as many people as I can think. I've had a lot of young journalists have come to me. Can you help me? I want to do what you do. And I have critiqued their work. I have discussed with them ad infinitum all sorts of different things about their careers and how they could get to the top. So I am not against it, but I just like, if you're going to be in my house where I'm working meaning ringside at a fight, then conduct yourself professionally. And, I wouldn't go to your place of work and interrupt you in the way you're trying to do business and how you're going to feed your family. Don't do it in mine. That's my only negative saying about it.
Have you have you had to resort to using content from any of these YouTube?
Using what? I'm sorry?
Using content like a quote or something. I know right now Deontay is doing has one out there, I believe from 78 Sports or whatever. Has that been an issue for you? Like, I can't believe, I gotta, because this is where he is now.
Well, I'm not sure. Yeah, I mean, no. If I don't So if I need to get the fighter, I can get him. So I'll figure out a way to get the fighter myself. But hey, I'm not against, if you come up with if you do an interview with Deontay or anybody else and it's a newsworthy story, I will credit you and say, hey, so and so talked to X fighter and the X fighter said this, and blah blah blah. That's the professional way you do things, right? You got to verify, like, hey, one of the problems is people intentionally post misleading or flat out wrong stuff on purpose. They're trying to catch somebody, right? And so you got to kind of try to verify, what's been said. But if hey, if it's a video and you can see, a fighter, saying something on camera, then yeah, you report on what he said and credit the source. That's the professional way to do it.
Got it. Have you been disappointed by that lack of professionalism amongst that bunch?
Yes.
Is it just like, hey, it's no sense of even hoping that these guys have developed any standards or it's just the wild, wild west, and it's going to continue to be that way?
Yeah. I mean, here's the thing, like there's a lot of people out there that'll say a lot of stuff, but what they usually don't do is say it to your face.
Exactly.
Like they'll say it online and then they see it. Like most people I see in person are always nice. Hey, I read your stories. I've been watching you for a long time, blah, 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 blah. They don't say it to your face. And then you come to find out, oh, this guy, was ripping me on this site or, whatever. I don't care about that. Like, I don't have a thin skin. I just don't like yesterday, as an example, this is totally off the topic of boxing, but I saw a bunch of people that I know on Twitter. They were talking about, they had a list of like cities that they like or didn't like. My most hated city, my favorite city. I love this city. I like this city, whatever. So I was doing nothing and I was bored and I filled it out and I put it up. Some guy, the first thing he does, he goes, I can obviously see you are, quote, a libtard, right? Now, as an example, the first city I hate was Philadelphia. Now, why did I say I hate Philadelphia? I was born and raised in Pittsburgh. I'm a Steelers fan. I'm a Pirates fan. I'm a Penguins fan. And right. I hate the Flyers. I hate the Eagles. And so the reason I put that on there, I said I like Chicago because Chicago has good food. I said I thought Orlando, Florida was overrated because when my first year and a half in college, I went to University of Miami in Florida, and we drove to Orlando, and it was boring, and it was landlocked, and it was hot. There wasn't much going on there, and so I didn't like it. So somehow, out of me commenting on the cities I like, this genius freaking says that you must be a quote unquote libtard. Now, that's what happens sometimes in boxing. People, they don't like you for whatever reason. They think you insulted their favorite fighter, or they think you scored the fight wrong, or for whatever reason. And now they have an axe to grind with you. And that stuff is stupid, right? Like, I may disagree with your score on the fight Saturday night. You may disagree with mine. It is what it is, right? Nobody, you're not right and I'm not wrong, or vice versa. I'm not right and you're not wrong. It's opinion. Gotcha. And people don't, so that's my only little area. And of course it's happened to me, right? A lot. And, it's no fun when it happens to you, but it's like, it says more about them than it does about me.
Gotcha. I know it's Friday night, so I'm gonna let you get on your way. Just last question. Was there any point, maybe November, December, based on different developments, maybe with the announcement of Showtime moving out of boxing, shutting down their live sports and all of that, or maybe some of these last couple of cards that have happened, but was there a point when 2024 was looking very, very, very uncertain for boxing? And if so, where are you now with 2024?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like we're on a good path. Could be better. A lot of the things we've already talked about, but the fights were made in 2023. That trend seems to be continuing in 2024. The fact that Haney and Garcia are talking about a fight is positive, encouraging. Virgil Ortiz is coming back. He's going to fight next week. That's encouraging. We want the good young stars to fight, and we want to see those young fighters and see their skill and see their personalities and their courage and their bravery, right? And I think that all that stuff, we want to see it. And it looks like it's going to go good. Boxing is one of those things, it's like you love it and you hate it at the same time because, it frustrates you. But I think, I'm not going to say boxing can overtake soccer as the biggest sport worldwide or the NFL is the biggest sport in the U.S. But I think, things are moving along. That we have issues to address, no doubt about it. But I think the talent in boxing is really good, and the fights are getting made, so we have to just kind of take the next steps down that path.
Any like 2 or 3 things that you really would like to see to encourage things going in the right. Again, we got the heavyweight undisputed fight out there. I mean, we haven't seen Boots, Jerron Ennis in a while, and now he's a champion or however that situation is with the IBF. Yeah. But we haven't seen him for a while. There's some pessimism around the rematch between Spence and Crawford. You mentioned Virgil Ortiz. Looks like we finally get him back. New life for AJ now. Is there any 2 or 3 things that you'd like to see to anchor like the first half of the year? Yeah.
Well, I mean, I think, the number one thing is to have a good fight on was it February 17th with Usyk and Fury. Let's have a really entertaining fight, and whoever deserves to win the fight wins the fight. Like let's get that right, and then maybe have a plan, for succession. How do we go down the road? It's probably going to be a 2-fight series, but it's not guaranteed to be, right? So let's start thinking about how do we, if Fury wins and there's no rematch, who does Fury fight next? If Usyk wins and there's no rematch, like in other words, if Fury wins and there's no rematch, what's the fight to make? Fury versus Joshua. If Usyk wins, though,
a little trouble.
do we have a rubber match right there? And then if you do, you say, okay, even though it's 0-2, we'll do it. And then Joshua wins. Now is there a fourth? When does it stop? And I don't mind. Like Pacquiao Marquez fought 4 times. Bring it on. I'm good to see it. But I don't think Usyk and Joshua, the kind of fights were worthy of 4 matches. So let's hope that
any confidence in that off of what we saw against Valine. Any?
Am I confident that Joshua is going to be able to be competitive?
Yeah, that he could come back and actually be competitive, and they could go down that road if he is the winner.
I think he has the physical skills to be good. I think AJ's biggest issue has always been, his own mental, he kind of talks himself into trouble, I think sometimes, right? And, hey, he lost Andy Ruiz. He got caught, right? They tell you heavyweights are different than anybody else. One punch changes the game in the heavyweight division. Andy Ruiz caught him. He should have just came back the next fight and just gone out there and kicked the shit out of Andy Ruiz, right? Just been AJ and said, I got caught one time. I'm not worried. But instead he boxed and he was tentative. And then there was a big uproar, and now he starts changing trainers, and, he kind of got lost, right? And I thought, even though Otto Wallin, not a big hitter, he was a good boxer and a smart guy, AJ decided, you know what? Fuck this. I'm going to go out there and I'm going to walk to him, and I'm going to put it on him, and he's going to have to make me back up.
Right.
And if that AJ comes out against anybody, I'm not saying he's going to beat Fury, and I'm not saying he's going to beat Usyk, but he is going to make it a very, very good fight. But if you get that AJ of, maybe 21, 22, where, he's on the back foot and everything, then I think it's a different story.
Got you. Okay. All right. Again, just finishing up with the last couple things that you like to really see happen to get the year going in the right direction, going into the second half of 2024.
I want to see Teofimo Lopez take real fights. He's a good guy for boxing, and he's kind of been going the wrong way. I'm not sure I like, everything he's been doing. So I want to see Teofimo Lopez take some serious fights. I want to see Shakur Stevenson really get challenged by somebody. I wrote when one of my final stories at Yahoo that I thought Shakur Stevenson was one of those kind of guys that could, be the face of boxing at some point and be the number one pound for pound guy in the sport. And I want to see him make moves in that, direction. And then I guess the other thing, nebulous, difficult, but have the sanctioning bodies get together and have a meeting and try to work out this title crap, because you know what? Terrence Crawford worked his ass off and put on the performance of a lifetime. And it is insulting then for the IBF to turn around and say, Jaron Ennis is the welterweight champion. Bullshit. That is terrible. And we need to end that. And that's what's going to happen with the winner of Fury and Usyk, because IBF's going to come right up right after that fight's over, and they're going to want him to fight somebody that, is not going to be high profile. Right. And he's going to, the title will be split again. So let's have the 4 sanctioning groups come together and figure out a way that they can work together, and they will all want their titles. So I'm not saying eliminate them, but let's have, as best as we can, one champion in each sport and make it so that, because that's the thing you hear fans say, what is the criticism? I don't know who any of the champions are.
Right.
Well, that's something we can correct.
Right.
We can't correct how good the fighters are. We can't correct, but we can correct how many champions there are. We can control that, and let's control it.
Got you. All right. We went a little over. I want to get you out of here. I do appreciate your time.
All right, brother. Thank you.
A lot. Is it possible I hit you again, maybe on some advice on some stuff?
Sure. Of course.
Gotcha. And hopefully, we maybe, few months into the year or something, maybe we can get back together and catch up on what's happened to that point.
Sounds like a plan, man.
Thanks a lot, man. Nice meeting you.
All right. Thank you. I appreciate you. Be well.
Take care.